Perfect bourbon is Mickey's 10-year-old. Oh, that's junk. Oh, that's junk. Welcome to Whiskey Uncut. I'm your host, Paul, joined by James.
Hey.
Hopefully we have somebody watching that can tell us if they can hear us, but there probably isn't right now because we kind of did this impromptu. We're on the wrong day. So it's been a little disorganized because I was out of town multiple weeks in a row on Wednesday nights, which is normally when we would do the show. And so, like the last 2 weeks in a row, I was gone on Wednesday night. And so it's just,
it happens. It's obviously your fault. So yeah, if anybody's upset about it, they can write you and complain about the lack of content that we're putting out there. And also, I mean, generally speaking, this is a hard time of year, right? It's towards the end of the spring, beginning of summer. I had finals week where I was grading ridiculous numbers of paper that were obviously written by AI, like just one after another. And so there's lots of stuff to deal with, but hopefully from here on out, we'll do the weekly again.
Yep. So I've got interesting lineup here today. This episode is sponsored by The Good Pour, which is a liquor store chain, kind of
like franchise.
Yeah, franchise is probably a better term in Florida right now. I don't know if they're anywhere else, but
I think they are, or at least they're looking to spread. But yeah, I think so.
But the concept of the Good Pour is that some portion of every purchase that you make goes to a charity of your choice. And so you can download their app if you want. And when you go shop there, you can put in the charity that you want. And you'll see on like the price tags everywhere, they have, if it's like a 12-pack of beer, it'll say like 75 cents.
Yeah.
Goes to the charity of your choice. Or some of the higher priced items, like they have some $200 bottles where it's like $30 to the charity of your choice, right?
I think it just depends on
what it is,
their value in the purchase, right? But I think they adjust accordingly, which is
nice. And from what I could tell, it doesn't seem like their prices are higher per se. It seems like their prices are pretty much what they should be. It's just they're splitting the difference of the whatever their margin would be.
Yeah.
And taking a lower margin and donating some to charity, which perhaps, I don't know, but perhaps they're getting that on the back end with the distributors as well, passing along.
Yeah. I did know. I stopped by the other day and they were showing me some wine and they said, hey, we just got a really good deal on this one. And that's why we got, $20 of this will go to charity. So I think it's nice that when they do get deals, they're not just upcharging, they're kind of keeping it the same and they're actually giving the residual over to the charity. So it seems like a good gig.
Yeah. So anyway, I have been hired by them to do a tasting on Monday. And
you were hired?
I'm hired.
Wow. You are a pro now.
I'm a pro. I've been hired by them. Well, I've been hired by one of the guys who's now a franchisee of them.
Yes. Yeah.
He has hired me to do many private events prior to this. And so now that he's with the Good Pour, he's doing an event there, and he wants me to come and talk about these whiskeys as the expert.
Of course, as the expert.
And walk people through and so
I think it's hilarious, by the way, that it's bourbon and rye.
Well, it happens.
Yeah.
So as the expert, I'm doing my homework, and I thought I'd do my homework live with you good folks. So usually what I do to prepare for a tasting, and I thought we would preface this episode as like how to host a tasting kind of thing. So
especially if you're a pro,
right? A pro like me, and you're hired
such tasting,
to do such tasting. After watching this video, you too will be able to charge.
You'll be a pro.
Pittance for your time.
It's funny because I've been doing a lot of these lately for Two Souls. We just had, we had an event.
With Chris Haynes.
Yeah, with Chris Haynes and
Shout out.
And with Jonathan Richardson. Which, by the way, Jonathan, was so happy that he bought the last bottle of Wisconsin waffles from you. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen him happier. He was like, dude, if it had been $250, I still would have paid it. So he was really happy. And then we did another one with Bourbon Women here in town at Dorn's.
Yep.
And this is the same thing I have to go through with each one of those because, you know, a lot of times we're including different bottles in each one. So it's, what are the flavor profiles? How am I going to talk about it? Do I need to tell people they should add a few drops of water? It needs to open up. What's my order going to be? Like, all of those things come into play when you do this. And people don't sometimes realize that. We're not just randomly pouring bottles. There's a lot of work that goes up front.
So, yeah, we do have someone here. We have Vortex 1988. And yes,
live.
You may be the only person here, Vortex, but we appreciate you watching.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't let anyone know ahead of time that we were going to do this.
But you have our full attention now, so you can ask as many questions as you want.
That's true. Yeah, so part of me doing the homework, you know, is I'll do this after I taste, but I go through and I go to, you know, distillery websites for each thing, and I try to read some of the product literature about, you know, what process it went through if I'm not already familiar with it. And obviously, like, if you're just doing a tasting at home and you're just having friends over or whatever, you don't necessarily have to do that. You could just try it and be like, oh yeah, whatever. But I've found that it's a lot more fun for everyone involved,
including the dog.
If the dog doesn't bark in the middle of the show. Yeah. If whoever's, you know, like if you're hosting a tasting and you're just inviting people over and they're not bringing whiskey, for you to kind of give them the story behind each one a little bit, you know, that's one of the things that I find so compelling about Two Souls is when you're pouring your stuff and you've got your barrel, you can walk me through the whole process of how you picked that barrel, why you picked that barrel, what steps the barrel went through, the distillation process, the distillery, whatever. All of that adds up. And a lot of times when you're tasting a whiskey, there's elements in the flavor that I would say that you would not pick up on.
Like, you mean they're directly related to the story?
They are directly related to the story of how that whiskey was made, that you won't appreciate is perhaps the right, that's the way to phrase it, that you wouldn't appreciate if you weren't told.
Yeah, for something like, especially like our cigar barrel, right? Like, we picked it, you know, specifically because of that, or some of the barrel finishes. I think you made a really good point too. It depends, the amount of detail you go into is going to depend on your audience. Right. And the setting. So you're going to be doing something, I assume, that's fairly formal, right? Where people are sitting down and you're going through one by one at a time.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
And that's, anytime you're doing a structured one like that, it leaves you more room to tell stories.
Right.
And to talk about the product. If people are just coming up to your table and they're taking random pours, they probably want snippets.
Right.
And then if you're at an event where everybody's just getting housed, they don't care. Like, I've been to ones where there was like 150 different bottles out and nobody's listening, you know? So I think, it just sort of depends. But in this one, doing your homework up front, you're going to want to command like the audience, each and every pour, and talk about the product and talk about why you picked it too. Oh, are you getting out your fancy decanter?
Well, we got so the tools, the accoutrements that you will need to do this is a method of precisely applying water
to
your whiskey, a crack pipe. And you'll need some water, which I drank most of mine, so maybe I'll have to go get more. I got really thirsty. And then I like to provide, and this is a janky one I made real quick last night because I don't have a color printer here. But I like to provide like a little mat because what I have found in my extensive experience of doing this is that when you hand people whiskeys, like when you go around a table, like when I've done more formal ones, and you pour stuff for people, or even in an informal setting, people are not always paying attention. It's really hard to get more than like 4 or 5 people to really be paying attention at a time, unless it's a very formal setting where everyone knows, like, okay, that dude has the microphone. He's standing at the front of the room. We're all going to listen to him now. It's difficult to get people to pay attention and to remember between pours what they've done. So it's really nice to have something that you can pre-pour in little shot glasses or whatever each whiskey to keep it organized for people.
So you have them pre-poured rather than going.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it's too
and
much.
That's what we did at St. Augustine too. Like we showed up, the mat was down, everything was poured out for us.
Right.
And then they walked us through one by one.
Right.
I've done it both ways. I've done that, and I've also done where I'll be talking about the whiskey and I'll be introducing it while Chad goes around and pours it.
Yeah, that
helpful. Works really well.
If you have a second person.
Yeah. That's nice, I think, because then people don't smell ahead. You know what I mean? A lot of times people start sniffing down the line or they'll jump ahead of you. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do. But I like this approach. It's certainly easier on the individual if you're hosting it by yourself.
Right. And then I also like to provide something like this. This was the one we got at St. Augustine. Something with a list of flavors for people to read off. Because when you're not an expert like me and James, who has this memorized.
Yeah, obviously.
But here's the thing. People talk about the power of suggestion, right? And they'll often say like, oh, well, I only tasted that after it was suggested to me. It's like, maybe, but probably you tasted it before.
You just didn't recognize
You just didn't have a strong enough connection in your brain to say that's clove or that's almond or walnut or whatever. And so when you have a list like this that just has tons of available flavors, what it lets you do is suggest to yourself simply by reading through the list and organizing it in your brain. And that's what, me and James are doing in our brains when we're tasting. It was like, oh, that tastes kind of grainy. Is it more malty or grain? Okay, it's kind of like corn or rye. Like that's the process your brain goes through.
Yeah. And I've had people ask like, I guess I've had a lot of people ask like, how do you train your palate?
Right.
And how did you get a good palate? And from my experience, the difference between people who have a limited palate and an excellent palate are exactly what you said. It's the ability to connect the flavor to a recognizable profile.
Right.
So most people, like I said, or like you said, will drink a whiskey and they'll taste caramel or they'll taste oak.
Yeah.
Or they'll taste clove or, cinnamon. But it's whether or not your brain can make that connection to that's what you're tasting.
Right.
And so that's why when I get like peach cobbler and things like that, right? Like waffles, like it's recognizable things that people can recognize. And I think that's the benefit of the wheel is that it's a crutch. It's a little bit of it's training wheels so that you can get the flavor profile. But I'll ask you this. I don't look at those when I do them, and I know you don't.
No.
So at what point do you think you stop using a flavor wheel? Because I've gone to tastings and I've handed these out, and about half the people use it, half the people don't.
Yeah.
So where do you think the cutoff is? So if I'm setting up a tasting and I have a group, is it if they're really experienced, do I not do it? If they're kind of intermediate, do I not do it? Do I only do it with beginners? Like where do you think the cutoff is?
I just like to do it in general. Because
So you would insult me by giving me a flavor wheel. Be like James. Like, just so you know, this woody thing you're tasting is oak.
Yeah. I mean, no, obviously if everyone in the group is like at your level, I probably wouldn't bring along a tasting wheel. Right. But you can tell as soon as you do that first whiskey, and you can just bring them along with you and not pass them out, as soon as you taste that first whiskey, you'll know when people are willing to give tasting notes.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to tell, right? Because when you have a group of people and you say, all right, like go ahead, smell this one. Does anyone want to volunteer what they're smelling? And everyone will just go dead quiet.
It's dead silent. I just did this. Nobody says anything.
Right. So even the one you did with the Ocala group,
they said nothing.
Those are all like pretty experienced people.
They'll just stare at me.
Yeah.
But I give out
no one wants to be wrong.
Well, and I think too, like nobody wants to say anything that's against the person who like made it or released it, right? True. But they'll all like there's lots of nods and stuff, and then I'll get good. Yeah, you're right, it's dry. So I get a lot of confirming things, but I don't typically get a lot of unique tasting notes from folks.
Yeah, and so that's why I find when I give these out, it gives people the crutch, even if they are more experienced, to just kind of read off, like, I think it's, I kind of get some aromatic spices or, some earthy spices, like maybe tobacco, like, I don't know. It seems to help people, like, because then it's not like their own thoughts. They're like, it's written right here, right? It tastes like that, right?
The only problem I have with it is I think you can make up a lot of flavors in a whiskey, just by talking yourself into it. So I can look at those flavor wheels and I can be like, oh, it does kind of taste like marzipan. And then your brain's like, wait, what the hell's marzipan? Right. Oh yeah, okay, it's vanilla and almond. Yeah. So it's stuff like that. Like, I wonder sometimes if it helps people or talks them into different directions that they probably shouldn't be going. And then, of course, a lot of times you go to distilleries and the distillery has their own whiskey wheel made around just their products, right? So it's not even really helpful for you outside of them. Like when I went to Woodford, they have their own flavor.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
They have their own list of the 9 million flavors in
Woodford Reserve. It's like, I'm like, there's no way that all these flavors are in Woodford Reserve. There's 112 here. Like, come on, man.
All right. But, So, anyway, those are some of the materials I like to provide. And then something to take notes.
Yes, always.
I don't provide people like a nice notebook, but usually like a little card with some lines next to each whiskey. Mostly because people at the end won't be able to remember which one. They'll probably remember which one was their favorite, but they might think like, oh, but which one was that spicy one? Or, which one was the one that had the sherry cask? Like, it's kind of nice for them to just be able to score it themselves or write whatever might give themselves a reminder for
it. And if you only have a couple, if you have 2 or 3, it's probably not as big of a deal. But when you get to 4 and 5, like, you definitely
6 or 7,
you definitely need something for people to keep track of.
Yeah. All right. So what order would you do these in? Because, and I'll tell you why I selected these first. My thought process here was, if you want to do a bourbon and rye tasting, I've never met this group of people before, so I have no clue. It's some sort of finance group that's doing this. So it's like a financial advisor putting on a thing where he's inviting some clients to come or something like that, and they're all into whiskey. And so I imagine there will be probably 30% of the people there have had nothing besides like Jack Daniels before, or Bland's, which is why I brought Bland's.
Yes.
For the 30% of the casuals.
That could be a really popular pour at this event.
Yes.
If it's casuals.
Right. So
yeah.
So I included Bland's because I assume at least 30% of them will be casuals. Woodford Double Oaked, same reason, right? I figure probably maybe like 10% of them, 20% of them will be like, I want cask strength, I want rye, I want something crazy. So I went for the Whistle Pig and the 12, because Whistle Pig that's what the high rollers are buying in the rye world.
And you went fancy too, because you went with a finished one with the 12-year.
Right. So
and then you got the JD rye
and the JD single barrel proof rye. So I figured those are kind of the heavy hitters for like the more nerdy guys at the event.
By the way, yesterday, as soon as you said that you picked out a lineup, I knew you were going to have Woodford Double Oaked. Like, I knew. I was like, well,
it's a Jig's pick.
I was like, what else are we going to have besides
one of his picks?
Yeah, but I know you love that one in tastings. You adore that one in tastings.
Yeah, okay.
And I get why, because it's like rich and sweet and heavy,
and it stands out.
It's also a very clear step up from the Stanford Woodford. Yeah. So if anybody's had Woodford, you're like, this is a lot better. Like,
I've also had issues in the past with tastings where I've tried to do like 6 bourbons that I think are all legitimate, like great bourbons, that when people are a little more inexperienced, they can't really tell the difference between as much, right? Because they're too similar. And so what I tried to do with this tasting was have your gold standard
maybe silver standard.
Silver standard. Classic bourbon profile. Your twist on classic bourbon with a finish like the sweet
the double barrel.
Yep. Your Old Elk cigar cut, which is going to be weeded, I think. And
I don't think the cigar cut is weeded.
Is it not weeded? But it is finished in a bunch of stuff.
I think it's just their standard bourbon, but it's finished in
Armagnac
cask and cognac casks.
Right, with all the crazy finish. So sherry, port, rum, and Sauterne.
Oh, okay.
Base whiskey. It's a blend of it. That's why. It's the high malt bourbon, the 6-year rye, and the 6-year wheat. With a bunch of different cask finishes. So I've never tried this one. This one should be kind of off the wall.
Yeah.
In terms of flavor profile.
I had it at a previous event. I liked it.
And then your standard rye, your gold standard for rye, which I think you would agree that's a pretty good gold standard for rye whiskey. JD single barrel proof.
Yeah, but it's very different than what your gold standard for bourbon is here because the proof level is so much different. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know. But I didn't have
that's my only critique of your lineup is you don't have
a low
proof standard profile rye. You may have to add a number 6.
Good point.
Because you have a finished and a super high proof, but you don't have anything in the 90 to 100 range.
He gave me a list. The Old Elk's 110.
Yeah. But you also have 90 proof in your bourbons.
That's true.
And then you only have high proof and finished in your rye.
Well, people expect rye to kick them in the face anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you were going to do it...
I'm going to scare people off of rye is what's going to happen.
I think you probably just honestly could just do the regular JD rye if you wanted and show the difference between the two. And it's a little bit sweeter and it's got a decent profile to it.
Well, that was not on my list of choices to select.
I mean, it's a really good lineup. You're going to go bourbon first.
Right.
And then you're going to finish on rye. The interesting thing for me is going to be the cigar cut is going to be last.
You think so?
Yeah.
Just because all the crazy finishes?
It's going to be a palate bomb. Yeah. And at 110 proof.
Because I would have thought go Blanton's Double Oak, Old Elk.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be last of the bourbons.
Oh, okay. And then go to the rye.
And then go to
the
rye.
JD and then the Whistle Pig.
That I don't know. You might have to end on the JD.
Even though the Whistle Pig's finished?
Yeah. It's going to be lighter in profile. It's lower proof.
All right. So maybe we need 2 glasses here.
It might be interesting to do finished bourbon,
versus
transition to a finished rye, and then come back with a big heavy rye. These are the things. And
this is what makes tasting so hard. And I agonize over this stuff for like...
And dude, I've done 2 tastings recently where I completely broke my normal rule, which is bourbon first.
Right.
I started with rye because our ryes were lighter and they were sweeter and the bourbons were really heavy.
All right.
And so you just don't know.
Let's take a wee sample of these and see how this goes. So, because my general rule would be bourbon before rye and then go in order of proof
and density.
Mm-hmm. And so usually, because the thing is like, let's say you want to do like standard flavor profile back to back. You could go Blanton's JD, but the proof difference is so drastic that when you try and come back to the Woodford Double Oaked, you're going to be in for a shock. I think it's going to taste thin, even though it's double oaked in a syrupy bourbon. Although I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, Blanton's is light. Do we have a question?
Yeah, Vortex says, on the topic of proof disparity, I once held a tasting with some friends with 6 bottles from the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society. All cask strength, most were okay. One was very not okay. I don't know what that has to do with the proof. You have to explain what you mean by the how the proof disparity was an issue. Just as far as like going in order of proof, it was okay, and then one didn't work. Yeah, I think that's what he means. Yeah.
And that happens a lot. And that's why you got to do the tasting beforehand. I don't think you can blindly say, let's just go in proof order.
Right.
You have to taste them a little bit because, for instance, there might be a world where you start with the Woodford Double Oak and then go to Blanton's. I don't think so. But if it's really super thin, even if it's sweet, maybe. Because Blanton's is certainly a step up in quality from what the Woodford is.
Yeah. The thing about Blanton's is it's so inoffensive. Like you could just drink
it's like
that whole bottle.
It's caramel, vanilla, and oak.
It's
bourbon. It tastes like bourbon.
It's really frustrating because it's like it's very delicious, but it's but it's also like not memorable in any way. Well, that's the best way I can describe it. Is it's delicious and completely forgettable.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of people ask about Blanton's, and we've had a couple people from with Two Souls write us and be like, "Hey, I really like Blanton's. Do you guys have anything that tastes like Blanton's?" I'm like, "No." No. And the reason is it's an older homogeneous product, right?
Well, it's a single barrel though.
Yeah, but they do so much of it that it barely counts. It barely counts. And I think for me, it's not a complex bourbon.
No.
It's tasty and it's approachable. I think it's a great entry-level single barrel.
But it is the finest bourbon.
It is. But I've never heard anybody describe it as overly complex. Now, when you get into the straight from the barrel, that's a different ballgame. But with the standard offering, it's pretty like inoffensive.
Yeah. Well, and the straight from the barrel, we actually did a side-by-side with George T. Stagg blind.
It was close.
And it beat it.
Did it beat it? I thought it was close.
I think it did. Oh, I think we had 2 Stags and 2 straight from the barrels.
Oh.
And I think they were
close. Yeah.
They were close. But yeah, I mean,
it punches above its weight for sure.
Oh man. The Blanton's just has it just has such a pleasant aroma. Like it's just there's nothing challenging about it.
No.
Yeah, so I think that's a good one to start on. That's the right one to start with. It warms up your palate.
Well, you're just breaking the rule though. You haven't tried the others yet. So, you got to give yourself some room here.
I'm just saying I think I'm right.
I think you're right.
All right, so now would your gut be to go to the double oak?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I'll let you open it.
Okay.
But yeah, that's where I would go. And like I said, I could foresee where you would start with this maybe even depending on how sweet it picks up right now.
Yeah.
Because
I'm worried about that.
Because the other aspect that you could do
because the last one I tried was so damn sweet.
I know.
I was just like,
The other thing you could do is start with it and say, we're going to start with a higher end bourbon, but it's a batched product, right? So we're going to start with that. Then we're going to move up to a single barrel, which is a little bit more exclusive. And then we're going to move up to a higher proof finished. So you could kind of go in terms of quality or like tier, right?
Like that. Got to sell them on it.
You got to sell them on it always. And this one is weird because I'm gonna say this before I try it, but a lot of times when I try double oaked, it's simultaneously sweet and thin.
Yeah,
and that throws you off,
right? And that's that's why I think that one just is weird to put in a lineup or difficult to fit into a lineup. Is because it's so heavy in character, but it's so thin in like viscosity.
It's like chocolate covered cherries and hazelnut and like nougat and vanilla, like and marshmallows. It's like pillowy. It's like a pillowy whiskey.
It definitely it smells like Christmas candy.
It's so damn thin. I honestly think I would start with it. It's really thin.
Yeah, it is.
The flavor's sweet, but it's really, really thin on the palate. Blanton's is much more viscous on the palate. And this is a hell of a warm-up. Like if you pour this and everybody kind of gets started,
right?
It's a good place to kind of it's not going to challenge anybody. They can get their taste buds warmed up and alive before you move to a single barrel. And this is a more maybe prestigious type of bourbon.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
You're sort of moving up.
That's true.
So you're we're preparing you for the next one. You can
Yeah, I guess I do see how this could be a good first one because it's definitely going to be the sweetest.
And I've been starting with sweeter. I've been moving sweet to dry. So like in some of my tastings, because the drier ones, particularly as they get higher proof, I think sometimes leave a little bit more of a linger and it's kind of hard to clear out before the next one.
Yeah.
And this one's just so thin that I think I would probably start with it. if I had to pick between the two.
You might be right.
I don't know if I would want to. Also, I don't know if I would want to start the tasting with something that people are like really familiar with, and
that
people might go crazy for, because they're gonna be like, "Oh my god, it's bland. What letter is it? Is it a B or an L? I have an L.
It's an S for anyone.
That's the worst one.
Is it the worst one?
I have no idea. I don't know. But of the two, I think I'd flip that.
Yeah, actually, the Bland's is more complex.
It is. And
well,
I think
actually, I would say that the aroma on the double oak, I would say the aroma is more complex, but the palate is heavily lacking to me. Which that's the other thing too, is like when you do like a tasting, is you got. I find even when people ask me, like, I want to do a really high-end tasting with all high-end stuff, I'm like, no, you don't. Like, you don't, because if you do like six, like, let's say I pour you 6 scotches that are all like $300 25-year-old scotches or something.
You can do that if you want.
Well, I won't, but let's say I did, hypothetically. They stop standing out because everything is of the equivalent quality.
Well, and at some point it's not instructional anymore.
Right.
I think part of what you're doing is you're telling a story. Like,
this plastic's gonna drive me crazy.
Oh, because you hate having the neck stuff on. Because here you start with Woodford and you say this is readily available, you can find it anywhere, but it's still a step up from the base.
But it is a jigs pick.
Yeah, but it's still a step up from the base. And you can kind of talk about it in terms of that.
How does that work with double oak? Because it's not a single barrel. Is it? Even when you do a pick?
You got to stop asking these kind of questions, Paul.
Oh.
Like, you're not supposed to know the
You're
answer.
not supposed to think about it.
No.
It's like Buffalo Trace single barrel.
Yeah, you're not supposed to know where that comes from.
Even though it's a batch product.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they do that. I don't know. All I do know, though, that I've been involved with those picks. And sometimes the bottles that you get do not taste like the sample that you picked.
Yeah.
And that makes me wonder, if it's not a single barrel, then what am I picking? And what am I getting at the end? But this, I think, is big. There's a lot of influence from the cask.
Well, now we're stepping up to 110 proof, which is a big jump.
And this is by the way, this is an interesting take on a cigar cut.
Well, this has all sorts of crazy stuff. Okay, so the 6-year high malt bourbon is being finished in sherry and port. Sherry for 2 years, port for 6 to 10 months. The 6-year rye whiskey component is being finished in a rum barrel for 8 months. And the 6-year wheat whiskey is being finished in a sauterne barrel for 6 months.
I would love to know the method behind this madness. Because
I can't. It seems like there can't have been a method.
I get a lot of sherry. There's no question. There's a lot of sherry. There's some winey kind of notes in there with the port. And I think this is a good example too. Everybody's kind of doing their own thing with cigar barrels or cigar cuts. The original was Cognac, Armagnac, and what's the third barrel that Nancy Fraley uses for the Magnus? It's Armagnac, Cognac, and I can't remember. But she uses
sherry,
3 barrels.
Right?
I can't remember. Maybe. But the whole idea was to create this kind of flavor profile that mimicked the things that you were getting from Armagnac and Cognac that were typically paired with cigars.
Right.
It's gone off the rails since that, though. Like, everybody's kind of doing different things, and I've seen Amburana as cigar cuts, which makes
a lot of the time
cry inside. And so they're just kind of going a different way. So this is a very different take on it. It's a different flavor profile than what I typically get. It's much more sherry forward. It's a little bit fruitier than what I get on like Magnus. Like Magnuson is big and kind of funky and rich. This is a different take on it, but it's still the biggest of these 3. So there's no question that it should be the 3rd, in my opinion, of the bourbons.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I
actually think you're going to have a hard time making the jump here from this to a rye.
So it
smells mapley too, doesn't it?
Yeah. To me, the aroma on this is somewhat restrained. And I think it's maybe a little muddled just because it's got so much going on. But overall, it smells tropical. It definitely smells kind of exotic. Like lots of different kind of fruit characters coming out.
It's hard to kind of zone in on something.
I reference my little chart here.
Okay. Let's see. What do you get?
I'm getting fruity.
Good job.
Is it fresh fruit or dried fruit, James? I get fresher fruit from this.
You know.
Is it apples and pears? No.
No.
Is it coconut? No, not particularly. Otherwise, I'd hate it. Apricot, citrus, ripe fruit. It's fruity, fresh fruit, ripe fruit. See, this is the flaw in the in the system.
I think it's more of like a stewed dark fruit.
Peaches and bananas.
I do not get peaches and bananas. It's more of like a dark cherry, like stewed dark cherry kind of note to me.
Yeah, I'm surprised that's not
heavy.
on here.
It's heavier.
Actually, cherry's not on here. That's a
big
oversight.
That's a huge problem
because that's very prevalent in bourbon.
Yeah.
But this is the St. Augustine.
Yeah, so it's tailored towards their stuff.
Towards what's in there.
They don't. They hate, and St. Augustine hates cherries.
Do they?
They do. They hate them. They hate anything that tastes like cherries.
Yeah. To me, it's kind of like it ebbs and flows between the characters. I would say probably the Sauterne is lost in the mix.
I don't. I mean, it.
Other than
I'm sure there's a component
dryness.
There. Yeah, if I tried it, maybe I could pick it out. I get a lot of sherry. Yeah. I get a lot of wheat. I get a lot of wheat whiskey in it.
Which is the Sauterne finish, but I get more of the wheat profile than a Sauterne. And because Sauterne's it's kind of a weird finish anyway.
Yeah. And it's also malty to me.
Well, it's malty bourbon. That's what they say.
So I think
I like it.
Yeah, it's good. I like it. It's just a very different take on what a cigar cut is.
You know how much this is?
$2,000. I don't know. $100.
Plus, it comes with a fake wood cork top.
I bet it's got to be like what 100 to 150 range.
I don't know. You want to look it up real quick? I don't have my keyboard. All right, look it up while I introduce the next one.
So yeah, do you think you're gonna go? So you think you're gonna go Whistle Pig next, right? Or do you think you're gonna go JD?
My thought would be, well, the JDs look super dark. We all know dark whiskey has more flavor.
It does, clearly.
My thought would be JD and then Whistle Pig, just because Whistle Pig's finished.
Okay.
But
why don't we try them side by side?
Yeah.
And then we can pick which one.
Maybe we gotta grab more glasses.
I'll go grab some. Hold on. So $135.99.
Okay.
So
yeah, that makes sense for the age and all the finishes that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows if you throw more shit in the bottle, it's worth more.
Right.
Just do more shit to it.
All right. So Vortex, he clarified. He said, basically just having 6 glasses of cask strength whiskey with some who are not used to that. One of my friends ended up in my bathroom for the rest of the night because his tolerance wasn't as high. That and the alcohol may have reacted with the medication he was on at the time. All right, so now we're getting the full story.
This is quite the tasting.
I was just excited to share because it was my first SMWS order. All the whiskey is good though. It was just probably too much for the uninitiated. Yeah, you got to be careful with the cask strength stuff with people that aren't used to it. And because what happens is like once you get that little bit of a buzz, you don't really notice the proof, even if you're an amateur.
And if you're drinking stuff that's like that doesn't drink like the proof,
right?
It really hits you in a hurry,
right? And so then the danger is you start drinking your normal quantity that you would drink of your 80 proof stuff, and you're drinking 120 proof. That'll catch up to you quick.
My problem with it when I first started doing like the barrel picks and I would go to the distilleries, my biggest problem was the further along I would get in the tasting, the more my taste buds would numb out.
Right.
So it would take me more whiskey to get the flavor. And so each barrel you're trying just a little bit more. And that is not a battle you're going to win.
No.
Like, that's not sustainable.
Now, he does say he tried, as we were tasting the double oaked, he said he has tried the Sagamore double oaked, which was weirded him out because he'd never had a rye that was sweet before. It didn't taste like rye at all. Yeah. I've had the Sagamore rye. I liked it. I've never had their double oaked rye.
It's very good.
Is it?
Mm-hmm. Which, if you know me, I like sweet on top of rye much better than sweet on top of bourbon. Just because I think it offsets the spiciness enough that it's...
I think this Old Elk is going to benefit a lot from sitting in the glass for a while, based on my expert opinion.
It's got a lot of that, like, I mean, whenever
I'm getting more already from it. Like, I just think it's such a complex whiskey. There's so many parts in it.
And that might be something that you can talk about. And that's an advantage to pouring it first, right? Because by the time you get to it, if it's going to be third in the list, it's going to get some airtime. You can tell people to swirl it and let it sit, and that kind of gets them intrigued. So when you start, you're like, hey, number 3, give it a swirl right now.
Let it sit.
Yeah, get them thinking about it. And it might be one, too, that can take a few drops of water.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I ordered little droppers to put at each table, like the little droppers that I'll fill with water, so people can add some water to their whiskey without just like dumping it in.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't provide them with the grade A crystal ones.
Yeah.
You know, I reserve that for myself.
I mean, you got to keep it classy in here, Paul.
Yeah, I got to keep it classy. But that's another good way to do it. Okay. So you just poured
both of them side by side. So the Whistle Pig's on your left and the JD Rye single barrel proof is on your right.
So I'm going to stick that behind the Old Elk so I remember. You're learning, James. You poured them in the same order that they're sitting on the table so that I can remember.
It's only taken me 3 seasons.
I know. Every other time you flip them for no reason, no apparent reason.
So my gut reflex was to do the Whistle Pig next and then end on the JD. And your gut reflex was to do the JD and then end on the Whistle Pig because it's finished.
Oh, the Whistle Pig is lighter.
It is.
Brighter.
The JD is a big ass, like, beefy smelling.
Yeah, it is. That's a brawny boy. That's like what we've got out here. We've got Chris Evans and we got Wolverine.
Oh man.
Or Chris Hemsworth or something.
Okay, so this is going to be a problem because the Whistle Pig is very, very light. Like, try that.
It smells crazy light.
It's very light. It's very thin compared to the Cigar Cut.
It's higher proof, though. Ooh.
It's not higher proof than the Cigar Cut, is it?
I think so.
It's only, I don't think so. I think it's...
No, 63% Madeira casks.
Yeah, I think it's 90-something proof, isn't it?
Okay. I saw the 63% and I didn't read in the terrible gold font on the red label. Where is the proof? Oh, it's 86 proof.
I thought it was really low.
There's the low proof rye.
Yeah. But it's finished.
And it's in Sauternes and it's in port. Man.
I think you might have to
crazy with these finishes.
I think you might have to do this third. You might have to mix up the bourbon rye. I think you might have to go Woodford, Blanton's, this, and then Cigar Cut, and then JD Rye.
Yeah, because after
the Cigar Cut, this doesn't taste like anything.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't taste like anything.
Yeah. It does smell good, though. I like the aroma on it.
Oh, man. And the JD Rye is a killer. That's really good. That is a big-ass rye.
You know what we should do? Now that the bottle's open, we should force Jigs to sell it to us. Be like, it's terrible. We can't use it in the tasting.
This is garbage. I think it was corked.
Right. Yeah, it was corked.
It was clearly corked.
But, I'll give you $60 for it.
Yeah.
And,
we'll even it up for you. We'll call it.
What's interesting? I don't like a lot of Whistle Pig's products. Like their standard 10-year, not my thing. It's too rye for me.
This cuts the rye.
Cuts the rye a lot.
Yeah.
The proof is too low, though.
It is.
Now
they do store picks and single barrel picks of this, And I don't know. I've never looked to see if the proof was higher. But to be honest, I've always walked away from that bottle because it was always too thin for me. Like if I see cask finish, I want it to be like, to me, what casks add is not just the flavor, but it also adds body.
Right? I might have to do that first.
I don't want to go that far.
No, okay.
But honestly, you could argue for it, I guess.
But
right?
Yeah, I think you're right. It has to come after blends. It can't come after old out. I totally, when I read the label, I read it at 63%. Because usually the percentage on the label is the ABV. Also, I'm pretty sure this is a pretty expensive bottle. And like, come on, Whistle Pig, you got
tags hanging, labels hanging off the side.
What's going on with this? Like, come on, do better.
I think you could argue for it to go first, except for the fact that it's too expensive.
And it's rye.
Yeah. I think you start with the Woodford.
Yeah.
You go with the Blantons. Then you come to this and say, we're going to go to a lighter finished rye. And then we're going to show you a finished heavy bourbon. And then we're going to end on the biggest.
Right.
What? And it's going to jump around a little bit. But that might give you a fun conversation point, too. Because you can say the inclination is usually to do all bourbon and then do all rye.
Right.
Or to follow proof ranges, but you got to try them, and you got to think about what's going to fit well with what, and what might mask the flavor of another one. Because here, coming out of that cigar cut, the only thing that's going to hold up to that cigar cut is the JD rye.
Yeah. And the JD rye smells great.
Yeah, I really like the JD rye.
The JD rye smells. That's a short robe whiskey right there.
It is. And I'll
short robe cigars and
generally speaking, JD single barrel proof, whether you're looking at the bourbon or the rye, is one of the better values in my opinion in the market.
I don't think I've ever seen it for sale to buy.
I see it all the time.
Oh really?
Yeah, and it's really. I
see the single barrel, but not the barrel proof.
Oh yeah, you can find it around. I've seen it at Total Wine a few times. The Good Pours had it multiple times. It's a good bottle. It's a really good bottle. And I can't remember the price is what, $60 on these, $70, something like that. And I think they're really good. When the first...
Dude, that's a beast.
Yeah. And when they first came out, everybody was like, holy shit, like JD does really good stuff. But these were the first ones that started to really open people's eyes, I think, to JD. And then they started to come out with some of the other ones.
Yeah.
That some of more of the special releases that I've really enjoyed. So they've done a good job, I think, over the past 10 years or so of starting to make themselves stand out a little bit with some of these picks, like the Heritage barrels, for instance.
So
or the Coy Hill barrels, which were 140, 150 proof.
Yeah, so it's an annual special release.
Yeah.
That's probably why I don't, because it's not available all year long.
Yeah.
Celebrates the early craftsmanship of the Jack Daniel's distillery, honoring a time when the American whiskey was often high in rye content and offered at barrel strength. Bottled in its purest form, right from the barrel and uncut at full proof, it's packed with Jack character from our signature smooth finish. Let's see. That's all they say.
That's it.
That's it?
They're not going to give you much on Jack Daniel's website. Come on, man.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's Jack Daniels. They don't care. You're going to buy it anyway. So they don't care if they tell you details.
Well, I was just curious if they filtered this through the Lincoln County process.
Well, of course.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily assume that.
I wouldn't either, but I'm just saying. But my guess is since they say it's packed full
in
of
their
Jack
signature
character,
smooth finish, yeah.
My guess is they do. So does that make it a Tennessee rye? Does it say Tennessee rye on it?
Well, I will tell you, here's what information besides that
does
they
say
give you.
Tennessee rye whiskey.
It has flavor, is a robust cast strength rye character.
Oh, that's a good flavor note.
Draws distinct flavors from barrel.
Also good.
The way they wrote that. That's literally I didn't that's what not from the barrel.
Just from barrel.
From barrel. Surprisingly smooth finish.
That is the worst fucking tasting note I've ever seen. So it tastes like rye from a barrel and it's smooth.
Yeah.
It tastes like smooth rye from a barrel. That's great. I like that.
Oh my gosh.
This rye smooth barrel.
Oh my gosh. And then you can register your bottle and get a name of a certificate you would like to register this bottle in someone else's name. Simply type the person's name in these fields. What's the point of that?
I have no idea. It's like buying a star.
Oh man. Hey, you can just buy a barrel on their website.
Oh, well, great.
That's pretty cool. Single barrel personal collection program. You should do that for $2.
Just buy a bunch of JD.
I gotta say, their little barrel selection.
Their tasters
kit.
are cool.
That's a really cool. Yeah, that's a really cool little layout. Very, very premium looking.
JD takes a lot of shit because it's just Jack Daniels, but I actually really like their special releases. I think both of their their single barrel proof offerings are good. I like the Heritage barrels. The Coy Hill barrels were killer. Like, I haven't had a chance to try some, like the single malt and some of the other stuff they've come out with, but they like their upper level stuff is I think really good.
Let's see if Blanton says any more about their bourbon.
No, of course not. They're just going to talk about how fancy the bottle is. Are you having a problem?
Yeah. Nose, caramel, palate, oak and vanilla, proof, cask.
Done. Done. What are we doing making complicated tasting notes? Like, dude, we don't, yeah.
You know what's funny, though? Those were our exact tasting notes for Blanton's.
That's true. We said caramel, vanilla, and barrel.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's about right. Look, we're spot on, man. We are the Buffalo Trace website.
Dude, that's...
And what's sad is this is much better than the JD description, which was smooth rye from barrel. So this is at least 2 steps up in terms of specificity.
That's amazing.
That's true. We did say that it just tastes like caramel, oak, and vanilla. We're good, man. You didn't know. That's why we
didn't know anything.
We're professionals. I thought that was like a really simplistic view of it, but it's not.
It's not. That's what they say too.
Yeah, so they think it's simplistic too.
Oh man, that's freaking hilarious. Because I always imagine, like, when we talk about Blanton's on the show, that there's somebody out there that's watching, who will see a clip and they're
just mad at
it. They're like, oh, it's got so many other flavors. It's like, no, it doesn't.
No,
straight from the horse's mouth.
The website. It's on the website. We are not exaggerating.
It only has 3 flavors.
So you could take your wall of Blanton's and piss off. We were correct. That is exactly what's on the website. Yeah, that's funny. Some of these bigger companies, though, man, that's what they do with their tasting notes. They're just like, you're gonna buy it anyway, so why make complicated tasting notes?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we did this because, this is part of doing the prep up front. Is if I had just shown up to this tasting, just winging it, I would have gone Blanton's, Woodford, Old Elk, Whistle Pig, JD, or even JD Whistle Pig, actually, probably.
Yeah.
Just thinking because it's finished and because I misread the label on the proof.
You just saw percentage and ran with it.
Right, and ran with it.
Yeah.
And it would have been a shit show. Everyone would have been like, why the hell is this Whistle Pig last? It tastes like nothing.
It tastes like water right now.
It's just, yeah. So you got to taste it. You can't just follow the rules. They're guidelines.
Yep.
Not rules.
And when you get into finishes and when you get into like cast strength stuff and things like that, and it gets complicated. It's not always going to be a linear thing like you're used to. But I think the lineup you have is really good here. And the one other, I
really like that Whistle Pig, actually.
It's good.
It's very light and refreshing.
Yeah.
Which is odd to say for a rye whiskey.
Easy drinker, man. I think the other pro tip I would give people here is if you have a very, very clear break like this, like the break between the cigar cut and the Whistle Pig 12-year is big.
Yeah.
This is where you give people crackers, water, something like that to kind of clear out the palate a little bit, because otherwise I think that Whistle Pig, the full character of the Whistle Pig and the finish on that Whistle Pig is going to get a little bit lost in the translation from dropping down in proof and dropping down in body. Yeah. But if you give people crackers, you give something like, or pretzels or whatever kind of in between, it will help sort of reset the palate a little bit for the Whistle Pig.
And going back to the Old Elk now, the sherry and port and everything is coming through a little more chocolatey.
Yeah, see, I'm so sensitive to sherry. You're like numb to sherry just because you've had nothing but sherry in your entire life.
Yep.
But for me, which by the way, I have a sample for you I need to bring next time from Richardson. But for me, like, it lingers a lot. And
Is it the Wisconsin waffles?
No, he's not. He is that mean. I take that back. But for me, you need that sherry lingers a little bit, and so you need something to kind of like take a break there. Yeah, you know, give some crackers, give some water. Like
the only thing I will say that I do like about having the Whistle Pig between the Old Elk and the JD, is it breaks up the heaviness. If it just needs to be a higher proof.
Yeah, if it was 110, 115 proof,
right?
Like, yeah, no brainer.
But the flavor profile actually works very well between the two.
It does,
because it kind of gives you a break from the heavier finish before the super heavy cask.
And it steps.
Barrel.
Yeah, and it's
taste from barrel on the JD.
And it also steps you up gently into rye, right? It gives you a lighter rye profile before you hit a heavier rye profile. So I agree. Like it makes total sense. But as it is, it's going to get washed out.
Yeah, the Whistle Pig, you know, I think the Whistle Pig, here's my question. If you were just tasting that solo, which is hard to say because your palate gets adjusted by everything else, do you think you would recognize that as a rye whiskey solo? Because I think it's so light and it's got enough cask finish on it. The spice is not, I don't know if it doesn't taste like bourbon to me.
No.
But it doesn't particularly taste like a rye whiskey to me either.
No.
It's
well, there's a couple of things here. One, it's low proof. Two, the finishes are actually pretty heavy.
Right.
When you go back to it, the influence from the casks are pretty dense.
Right. It's kind of a, like, I think I'd be stumped.
Yeah. And three is my guess it's Alberta rye. And Alberta rye is an entirely different beast than MGP rye. Alberta rye to me comes off more florally. And this has a floral characteristic to it. And I think that just naturally makes it taste less rye to a lot of folks because you're used to like cinnamon bombs coming from MGP.
Yeah. To me, this tastes like, it almost smells like an odd single malt.
Yeah. So it's probably a combination of the fact that it's Canadian rye, which is weird for a lot of people, and it's low proof and it's finished. Yeah. So you're finishing kind of a floral whiskey already, which is going to make it fruity and floral, and then you're proofing it down.
It's a very pretty whiskey, actually.
It is. It's kind of perfumey almost, right? And I think that's sort of one of the characteristics of Alberta. I like Alberta rye, but for me, to drink Alberta rye, it has to be relatively high proof.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it comes off as light to me and kind of thin. But on this one, but man, I'd love to drink that at 120 proof.
Yeah, that'd be really nice. So our lineup is really going to look like, actually, it's just almost the way we had them on the table.
Yeah, you just got to bump one to the front.
Bump one to the front. Well, it's backwards for the people watching though, but for us, left to right. For you guys, right to left.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining me for this, James.
Yeah, this was fun. Yeah.
We haven't done something like this in a while. And
this should be our new hustle. We should do Whiskey Uncut tastings.
You just get other people to send us all the stuff.
Yeah, and just go around and do tastings, everybody.
Dude, that'd be really fun. I'm down for that. I think I made us business cards. I'm the whiskey som, and you're my assistant to the whiskey sommelier.
That's great.
Is your title?
Awesome. I'm glad to be your assistant.
It's okay. You're still learning.
I am. I mean, really, it's really kind of a mentor-mentee relationship.
Yeah.
I'm an apprentice,
a grasshopper, if you will, of whiskey tasting.
Clearly.
So my parting words of wisdom. If you want to do a cool tasting like this, reach out to the Good Pour. If you want to do a tasting there, with like a nice venue and like all this stuff, he's gonna have like charcuterie boards and all this stuff. So if you want to promote your business, do like a little business, a wine and dine night, call up the Good Pour and tell them that you want me to host the event, and we can hook you up. Or if you just want to do something private at your house and you're local to the
Whiskey
Alachua
Uncut.
County,
call Whiskey Uncut, baby.
Right. If you're local to Central Florida,
and even
area,
if you're not, call us and fly us there.
Or yes,
and I will come to your house and do
100%. Yeah, we will. Yeah.
Just fly me there. I will.
It's honestly, it's a fantastic time. We make cocktails and
I mean,
we got a whole.
We're definitely worth the money to fly us there and do it. We might even maybe we could even do a show live from somebody's house.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah. Look, I'm figuring out all ways for us to make money. Just money.
But yeah, thank you to the Good Pour for providing these to us to taste and promote. So
yeah, thank you. This was fun. I like to do this kind of stuff because it, my day to day with whiskey is just picking barrels.
Right.
And this is this is stuff somebody else has already picked. That's nice. Now I just have to figure out where I want to put it.
Right. And you just get to enjoy it. You don't have to think
about it and get all nervous about if everybody's going to hate it or not.
But remember, tune in. Hopefully, are you good for next week? I think we should be good for next week.
Yeah, I'm fine.
So we should be back to our regular schedule Wednesdays next week. And yeah, I think that's all I got.
Yeah.
All right. Well, remember, as always, to drink, share, and enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers.